One of the things that I'll do when I'm shooting a match where there's a lot of outdoor elements, and it's not just here at Camp Perry, if I'm experiencing a lot of buffeting conditions where it's not a consistent wind, but there's ups and downs and ups and downs, I try to find a sequence or a repetition that seems to be happening. And a lot of times the wind will blow really hard for 2 minutes, but then there'll be a lull for like 40 seconds. And the time to pay attention to these kinds of things is before you come to the firing line. If you're on relay 2 or 3, or you're coming, sit there and try to anticipate, what the wind's doing, and say, okay, for 3 minutes it was blowing pretty steady, then it seemed to stop for about 15 or 20 seconds. Try to see how many times that happens, and a lot of times weather has a bit of a cyclic kind of effect, and you can find those lulls and anticipate them. And if you know there's going to be lulls, you can try to prepare yourself to shoot in those lulls. A lot of shooters come out here, they're oblivious. They just kind of get up and shoot. They're not really thinking about the happenings that are going around them. So being very in tune with your environment and being very aware of what's going on can be a tremendous advantage. I know on many occasions I've sat and I've waited and I've waited and I've waited, and I'm down 7 minutes into my 10-minute shooting time on slow fire, knowing that there's going to be a lull, and then I know I have 3 minutes, and I get up and I'll shoot a couple shots at a time, and I'm shooting in a very low wind condition where most people are shooting in a high wind condition. Obviously it helps my score. One of the things I do when I shoot at my home range is to try to prepare myself for shooting in the wind is I'll take a circulating fan, and it's a medium-sized fan, but I'll set it up high and I'll have it blowing across on my shooting hand so that it's making me be aware of that breeze and the wind. Now, it's not the same as shooting up here at Camp Perry, but it makes me aware that the conditions have changed and I have to adapt to those conditions. And it does cause you to be a little more in tune and pay a little more attention. You get used to the fact that there can be another element that's changed. You can still stay focused on your shooting task and your shot process. A lot of times shooters only experience this kind of wind here at Camp Perry, and they do it once a year. So they're never really prepared for it, and they're trying to learn on the fly. Camp Perry is a great place to learn a lot of lessons, but it's not a great place to learn lessons and put up big scores simultaneously. You want to have the lessons learned and grow from that, and be prepared when you come to Camp Perry to make the most of the new training regimen and the mindset and the kind of focus point that you've got for your shooting process. Let's talk about shooting position a little bit. At Camp Perry, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of benches that go up and down this firing line, and it's luck of the draw. You don't know what relay you're going to get, you don't know what firing point you're going to get, but usually when you get a firing point, you're there all week, so you got to make the most of it. Don't let that get into your head. Every few years, it's like a monsoon up here. It'll rain so hard that we're literally standing in ankle-deep water, or you're standing in mud, or you're standing in a quagmire. I mean, it's bad enough that it'll pull your boots off your feet. You just accept it. It's random. If you get a bad shooting point and it's terrible, you can ask to get repositioned, but most people accept it as part of the Camp Perry experience. You just do your best. Don't let it get into your head. Everybody's shooting pretty much in the same environment, so you just do your best, make the best position you can, and start focusing on your shooting skills again. Quit thinking about your feet or how wet you are, how uncomfortable you are. You're outside. This isn't small bore inside of a covered shooting position. It's the Nationals. It's part of it. It's part of what makes the Nationals the Nationals. One of the things that people have a problem with shooting at Camp Perry is sometimes their stance. Sometimes you get a firing point where it's wallowed out, or there's a high and a low point and they just can't find that good stance. Well, you may have to modify a little bit. You may have to maybe shoot a little taller stance, or a little shorter stance, or a little wider, or a little narrower stance. Be prepared to be flexible. I believe that most shooters perform poorly at Camp Perry and well below their average, not just because of the elements, but because they let things that they're not used to get into their head, and they're out of their bubble. They're not focusing on their shot process anymore. So we want to minimize those things by preparing for them, train for them. One thing about shooting at Camp Perry is it's a very fast-paced tempo. The range officer is going to keep things moving. If you're not prepared and you're not in front of the curve, you will be pushed onto an alibi relay, or you're going to be rushed and you're not going to shoot your best. Know what's coming, have your magazines loaded, have everything ready, be waiting on the range officer instead of the range officer and line officials waiting on you. At Camp Perry, you got hundreds and hundreds of shooters up here for pistol. Nearly, some years, pushing 600-700 shooters or more. There's a lot of things that can go wrong during that. You're gonna have a lot of alibis, there's gonna be a lot of problems on the line, there'll be a lot of stops and a lot of starts. The range will be called cold because, a boat's in the impact area, or a bald eagle's nesting on the berm, or what have you. You just got to flow with it. There might be a 2-hour stoppage of shooting. There's times you come up here and there's lightning and rain and you go back and there's a 4-hour delay and you got to come back and shoot in the evening. Just roll with it. You're not going to change it. The tail is not going to wag the dog. Have a mental program and be prepared for that. If you have a shooter next to you or below you and they have an alibi or they have some kind of catastrophe, don't let their catastrophe get into your head. Compartmentalize yourself. You stay focused. You may have to sit there for 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, but don't pay attention to what's going on with them. Stay in your zone and stay focused on your shot process. This will help you do better at Camp Perry. Another thing you need to keep in mind when you get to Camp Perry for pistol, you need to go straight to the target trailers, get your targets, get everything ready, find your shooting point. It's great seeing friends, it's great talking, but you're there to shoot, you're there to compete. Have that as your priority. Make sure that you're squared away. Run through your mind what you're going to do as you're walking to the line or the night before. When you have a shot process, your shot process may not start the second you pick the gun up. It might be preparing for the match the day before. You might think, okay, remember to go get my targets on the way to the line, put my targets under the bench. You may want to organize your targets a certain way so it speeds up target changes as you're going down to score your targets. All of these little things will help you be more in control and in front of events when you're at the Nationals at Camp Perry shooting Bullseye. For instance, one thing you should do when you get a chance is you're the first down to the line, put your box up, get your scope on target, get it focused, have everything ready. Anticipate the next step that the range officer is going to ask you to do. This will help you stay in front of events and it'll help you stay in your bubble and be more in control, therefore performing at your highest level as possible. Sometimes a line official might come up. I know one year I had a line official come up and there was somebody's timer on the line beeping. Well, you're not supposed to have any audible timers. Everything has to be silent. Well, I knew it wasn't my timer. I recognized that I wasn't the one that was making an infraction of the rules, but this line officer was convinced it was my timer. And he came up and made a real big deal. And unfortunately, he did all of this about 20 seconds before we started firing slow fire for the next relay. Well, that was a breach of what the line officer was supposed to do. He was completely out of bounds for what his job responsibilities were, and it come to find out that there was a person several places down the line whose timer was beeping, and the problem was that line officer was interfering with my shot process. He was interfering with my ability to stay focused, and I hate to admit it, but it affected me greatly. I was very frustrated and irritated, and it come to find out that of course the line officer shouldn't have done what he did, but my score suffered. And this is Camp Perry. It's kind of like the referee running out in the middle of a play in the Super Bowl and going, "Oop, whoops, sorry, didn't mean to mess that play up. We'll just have to take that touchdown back, but sorry." So things are going to happen. As you mature as a shooter and a competitor, you realize it's life. You can't control every aspect of it. When something invades your shot process and something invades your bubble where you're in there trying to focus and perform, you try to adapt to it. You try to put it behind you quickly, get back on task, get refocused on the front sight, trigger control, and etc., and perform your best. Things move fast at Camp Perry. First of all, it's the Nationals. It means more than any other match that you're going to shoot this year. So you care more. When you care more, there's more anxiety. When there's more anxiety, there's more pressure. When there's more pressure, things speed up. When things speed up, you have a tendency to forget some things or maybe miss some steps. At the Nationals, things go very fast, partly because they really are going fast, and other parts because they seem to go faster. So you should train on a very strict clock. When they give you a prep period, get your stuff done. Train at home on a very brief prep period. Make sure you got a routine down that gets you all your stuff squared away. Your magazines are ready, your dots on, that your windage is right, you've changed elevation if you're moving from 50 yards to 25 yards. Make sure you have all this stuff down and train like it's the Nationals every time you train. I believe it was Vince Lombardi that said that it isn't practice that makes perfect, it's perfect practice that makes perfect. There's nowhere this is more true than in the shooting world. You must practice like you're shooting the biggest match that you've ever shot. Is it the same? Well, it can never be the same. That's why big leg matches and national championships and world, ISSF events are important, but you try to get yourself in that mental focus. Not only should you train fast to get used to it, you should also prepare yourself for long delays. Whether it's bald eagles landing in the firing line or the berm area, whether it's boats in the impact area, lightning, weather delay, all of these things can have an effect that will cause a very, very disruptive process to your shooting routine. We have to be flexible. You have to just roll with the flow and just accept that at Camp Perry, it's Camp Perry. You'll be a better shooter and you'll be more in control if you do these things.